All right, good morning and welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed your conference experience so far. This has been a phenomenal day filled with amazing work and best practices. To close out day one of our summit, we are honored to have 5 Missouri legislators join us this morning. But before we get started, some virtual etiquette reminders for all of you. All participants should stay muted to eliminate background noise. We want to see your faces, so if you have a camera, turn it on to better engage with us. All presentations will be live, so bear with us on any technical issues. The chat will be monitored for questions throughout the presentations. If you enter a session, in the future, if you enter a session and decide that it's not for you, you can go to something else. But this is the last session today, so you need to be at this one. All sessions will be recorded, so you will be able to access them after the conference. And don't forget to engage with us on social media using #equity2021 at MoDude and our new conference website. So now I'll turn it over to Gerren McHam, Director of External Relations, to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's final panel discussion. We look forward to wrapping up the morning on a high note with our esteemed panelists on topics at the top of mind for many Missourians. The world is slowly rebounding from 2020, and many are taking long looks at problems started and or exacerbated by the pandemic. And across all walks of life, topics we've discussed in research, policy, or forums like this have taken center stage last year and creating ripple effects that we will feel for years to come. Among these topics are affordability and equity. And while education has been called the great equalizer or an important stepping stone in one's pursuit to professional advancement or a sense of really fulfillment, education, in this case today, higher education, is not immune from having to grapple with how to keep prices affordable and provide opportunities for all who enter its doors, regardless of background, upbringing, or in today's world, in person or remotely. So today we welcome lawmakers who I truly respect and who bring their own experiences to how we should not only think about affordability and equity, but what steps we as stakeholders in higher education should consider or take into consideration when we look at lasting change and the advancement of all. And so in the screen before you, I'm going to present our panelists. First, in order as they're shown there, is Senator Brian Williams, representing the 14th Senatorial District, part of St. Louis County. He's a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator Greg Razer, representing the 7th Senatorial District on the other side of the state, part of Jackson County. He's a member of the Senate Education Committee. Representative Kevin Windham, representing the 85th from Hillsdale, serving on the House Budget Committee, its Appropriations Subcommittee on Education and Higher Education Committee. Representative Rusty Black, representing the 7th from Chillicothe. He chairs the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education and on the larger House Budget Committee. And Representative Brenda Shields from St. Joseph. She is the vice chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education on House Budget and also chairs the Higher Education Committee on the House side. And so with that, we'll start it off with the top with Senator Williams. If you can hear me, sir. We have national results by race and ethnicity show a gap of 25 percentage points between the overall completion rates of Black and white students who started in four-year public institutions. In addition, according to another study, low-income students are 8% more likely to experience challenges while attending online classes and 11% more likely to consider dropping a course because of concerns with grades will jeopardize their financial assistance. What factors in your community have you heard or seen it prevent students from returning to school or are a significant roadblock?
All right, sorry about that, Gerren. I was unmuting myself. You know, that was a really good question, very loaded question. I would probably say there's several factors that impact it. First, thank you for having me here, and it's a tremendous honor to be able to just have this conversation with my colleagues at the state level and talk about the future of our state, our economy, and our workforce, higher education. I think that Missouri's its existing system has just been underfunded for just more than a decade. So, with the state funding for operating our higher education institutions sitting below fiscal year 2010 levels, until we have a full pie, I'll be reluctant to start, cutting thinner slices to some schools based on a new system. So I think that it's if we start to look at how do we adequately fund higher education institutions, then we'll continue to look at, we'll have to continue to look at incentive models that go beyond base funding. So as long as we recognize diverse populations that's different among colleges and universities that we serve, I think that would be a first step. And I'm open to a conversation about performance funding. I'm skeptical that some institutions like our two HBCUs will be treated fairly, Harris Stowe State University and Lincoln University in Jefferson City. And then I think the challenges faced by institutions who primarily serve first generation students and students coming from poverty are just very different than schools serving wealthy students and that have completely different levels of preparation and support.
Yeah, those are all great points there. And yes, and for our institutions, especially when we're talking about supporting students more holistically, the resources are not there for them to do so. And that does create a major roadblock. For Representative Black, kind of wanted to ask you the follow-up question. And I think Senator Williams actually brought up a really good point in regards to funding as well. In regards to, you mentioned kind of outcome-based funding is also something that's been talked about a lot in regards to funding our institutions more adequately. And so part of that is being able to come up with a model that basically incentivizes beyond just enrollment numbers. We've seen that in Missouri, we do have a performance funding model that takes a look at certificate completions per FTE or degrees or a percentage of change in full-time student tuition and fees. What type of model would you likely maybe support if there is new money available for higher education?
Well, thank you, Gerren, for asking me that question. It has been something that's been discussed, I guess, at least in my office in different corners around the Capitol. We even sat in a late night committee meeting my first or second year there, and it's about 2 o'clock in the morning before we finished the discussion on this. The performance model that put together in our state, I for sure don't know all the details about that and how it went, how it come forward, but both Senator Pierce and Representative Lair that I believe worked on this model for approximately 2 years. And I want to say the institutions were stakeholders at the table during the discussion when they did come up with our performance model in Missouri. And I guess I would like to see us first, back to Jim's talked about, back to that core funding level or as close to as we can. That what Senator Williams 2010 is that was that the high point or 29?
Yep, 2010.
Then once we start putting additional funding into higher ed above that point, I would like to see us use the basic model that we have now, knowing that there can be some changes to that model as we go along. That is one, I believe, one negative about our term limits. I don't believe anybody that's on this participating today were around whenever this model was put together. So including you, Gerren. you're as new or newer than some of the rest of us sitting here, and trying to catch up and gain knowledge about it and try not to screw it up. I mean, one of the things that I want to be one of my models while I'm in the legislature is do no harm. Well, sometimes when we make decisions to change things and we don't include all stakeholders, we make those changes, we end up doing harm. So I don't know whether I answered your question. I think that we've got a model to begin with, and I know it wasn't dreamed up during the night. It was something the committees met. They looked at other state models. I think they visited other states, both Senator Pierce and Representative Blair. They used stakeholders to come up with it. I'm sure there are changes people want to make to it, but I don't believe we need to recreate something new just to put my name beside it. So the one we have, I think, is an awful good starting point.
Yeah, well, great to hear that. I will say, full disclosure, the department will and has introduced, at least for our FY23 budget, that we would like to increase operating funding for our institutions by CPI, which should bring it closer to that FY 2010 number. So it's great to hear that support. So next question goes to Senator Razer, and basically I'll give you an opportunity to answer the previous question first in regards to are there any other measures that we should consider when we talk about, outcomes-based or performance-based funding for institutions? But also, I'll provide you an opportunity also, if you'd like to mention any significant kind of roadblocks you see preventing students and specifically students of underserved populations from going back to school after the aftermath of the pandemic.
First of all, thanks for having us on here. I think a lot of the problems that we're seeing with underserved populations, and that is obviously, the African American community, the Hispanic and Latino community, and our rural populations are very similar. It's a lack of access to broadband, a lack of access to public transportation. We're going to have a lack of access to childcare, and if we want to help people rise up and help people help themselves, we're going to have to invest. And we're going to have to invest in public transportation, in childcare, so that people, when they enroll, can stay enrolled, that they can finish their degree program. We have to look at those things. We also have to keep in mind that there is a population of Hispanic Missourians who are citizens of this state. They are legally here that have to pay international tuition rates, which essentially makes going to college in Missouri impossible for many of them. So there are significant roadblocks that span the entire state. When we look at funding models, I think that's difficult because each one of our institutions serves a different purpose and a different population. If we want to look at how do we judge performance, well, that's going to look different for each institution. And I think we have to keep that in mind. But all of this comes back to the fact that I think it's been said it's 2010 that we're lower than. I think if you take out the federal funding that we received in last year's budget cycle, that actually goes back to around 2002, that we are giving our higher ed institutions less actual dollars out of general revenue today than we were in 2002. That's the wrong direction. We sit here and scratch our heads wondering why our institutions are struggling. We scratch our heads wondering why it's difficult for students to attend. And a big hunk of that comes down to we aren't supporting the institutions the way that we should.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Before I pivot to other questions, again, we want to cover a lot of ground this morning. I didn't want to allow Representative Shields and Representative Windham, if you wanted to jump in and add any final thoughts on this, and then we'll get the ball rolling with you, Representative Shields, and then Representative Windham.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I think my three previous legislator friends looked at my notes. So when you and they've given a lot of my answers, but I think when you invite people on your panel that are like-minded, we all are going to kind of agree on the same things. You brought up Senator Razer the cost of going to college. I was as I look and I was getting ready to send our own children off, and this was 10 years ago, and it's only gotten worse. That when I attended the University of Missouri in 1980, my tuition was $800 for the year, not a semester, but for the year. And I think now it's 12,000 for the year and 24,000 if you include all of your living expenses in your books. And inflation has not increased that much, so we absolutely have stopped supporting our universities at the level, and we know that through those numbers. But if we want to make higher education affordable to everybody as a state, we have to begin to start funding our higher education more. The other thing that we were talking about a funding formula, and I am a person that follows the data. I'm a numbers person, but there are some things that we do at our universities that just are not measurable, that makes education successful for all. And I think that we need to measure persistence to graduation. I represent Missouri Western State University, one of the three open enrollment schools we have in the state, along with Harris Stowe and Lincoln. And our students don't have to have a certain ACT score to attend college. Many of them are part-time students, or they're paying their own way, they're getting student loans, and it might take them 6 to 8 years to get their degree. But that doesn't fall within the performance model that we have right now. I also think we need to look at what other supports that we provide our students. I mean, many of our students at Missouri Western, I speak about Missouri Western because it's the one that I'm most familiar with, and I taught in St. Joseph. They are, first time generation going to college, and they don't have anybody at home to ask questions of. And I think that we need to provide a better level of support at the university level for our students to be able to navigate. I know how many of my students went off to a university at Missouri State or Cape Girardeau and came back after a semester because they didn't know how to navigate the system. And with that, I'll let Representative Windham take over. We have lots of time to talk later. So thank you very much.
Yes. Representative Windham, I'm going to give you another question, but feel free to jump in on the previous questions. It still could be kind of dollars and cents related, but we all know that the state student financial aid is part of a complicated puzzle that is combined with federal aid, with both grants and loans and institutional aid. And however, different state programs have different goals and rationales behind them. So you have your need-based programs targeted at certain students, and then you have those merit-based programs as well. And states across the country have taken different approaches. Some states offer a blended program as an option. So regarding equity and Missouri's financial aid programs, where would you like to see more investment and why? And if you could make changes to the programs that exist now, what would they be?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Gerren. Thanks for having me too. You got an all-star panel here. So I think that speaks to some of the good work that the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development is doing. But I think that if anybody's ever heard me talk, they probably know that I'm a proponent of reforming the scholarship programs that we have as a state right now. So I would like to see more investment in our need-based aid
is
right
not
now.
available. At the tone, please record your message.
But
when you have finished recording, you may hang up.
Looks like someone's not available. Go ahead. Sorry, Representative.
So no, that's good. So I think that our scholarship programs, we need to put more money in our need-based aid right now, which namely would be Access Missouri. However, we just need to completely redo our scholarship programs, to be completely honest about it. So our scholarship programs are disjointed and likely just inequitable beyond repair. So the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis's League of Student Advocates released a report recently that outlines some of these inequities. And it showed that Access Missouri, which in my opinion is the better of all the programs, has and these are numbers from the Department of Higher Education. It has it serves a Black population of about 13%, while the A Plus program serves a Black population of about 2%, and the Bright Flight program, which A Plus and Bright Flight are both merit-based, serve a Black population of 1%. So the A Plus program is a particular thorn in my side because it's advertised as free college, but it's actually a last dollar scholarship where students that have a high financial need don't usually end up reaping the benefits of it because they get their Pell Grant and their Access Missouri scholarships that usually make up for tuition and fees. Usually these students still have to take out loans for the additional cost of attendance. But I think that these inequities on top of the median household incomes of all the programs just show that we may need to take a harder look at the programs, especially looking at the disparity between all of them, between either the household income and how much money that the students get from the said scholarships. It's a big problem in my mind. So. And for the sake of being brief, because I know we got a lot to cover in this panel, I'll leave that there. But I knew that the senators would hit it out the park, but I do want to touch on performance formulas a little bit. So I recently read a book by Adam Harris called "The State Must Provide," which was a really good book. A plug for everybody to take a read of that book. But in the book, Harris speaks a little bit about performance-based funding, saying several states have switched to funding models based on the success of institutions. More selective colleges, such as state flagships, generally pull from a crop of students who are often better prepared for the rigors of college. And even if they are not, such institutions have the money to provide supplementary support for them in the form of counselors, tutoring, and other academic services. In these states, the more students an institution graduates, the more money it is awarded the next year. The more research it produces, the more money it receives. Predominantly white institutions have had more than a century to build up credit for these systems, even as they have had paltry Black enrollments. Meanwhile, the institutions that are access-oriented, providing Black students a path to future success, are shut out of the added financial boost. The colleges are usually smaller, do a little less research, and do a lot more for minority students. Now, thinking about that on the state of Missouri level, we got two land grant institutions. We got the University of Missouri, and we got Lincoln University. So the state of Missouri has forced Lincoln University to submit a waiver to the federal government, so that means that Lincoln has ended up returning over $11 million to the federal government. And it could have been more if Lincoln didn't move around some money in its own budget. So which institution do we really think is going to have a better percent general expenditures dispensed on the core mission of the college or institution, which is in our funding formula, our performance-based formula right now? So since we're in an equity summit, I think that's especially important to center. And then also thinking back to the fugitive slave laws in Missouri, when folks turned in fugitive slaves to the state of Missouri and their owners didn't come to get them, the state of Missouri would sell slaves at auction, and some of those proceeds went to the University of Missouri. So I think it's time for the state of Missouri to pay what it owes, and then we can talk about performance-based funding.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to unpack there. And I do want to turn it back over to Senator Williams. And I want to first pinpoint about the student side in regards to financial aid. I know there's a lot of in which there may be statutory changes necessary in order to expand beyond tuition and fee based for a lot of our financial aid programs, and that's less than statute, and other changes that might be necessary in regards to affordability and access of aid for underserved populations. Senator Williams, is there anything else just to add on the financial aid front, what you would like to see done on the structure of our financial aid programs, or what should be the guiding light or the North Star for funding financial aid in the state of Missouri?
Yeah, absolutely, Gerren. That's a great question. As the rest of the panel stated, I mean, student financial aid is one part of a complicated puzzle. So, when you combine it with all these different types of aid, it just becomes even more convoluted. I think I would like to see more investments in Access Missouri. I think Access Missouri is one of the most important financial aid programs in Missouri. It's also a need-based program that supports the students who need the aid the most. So, once again, we should not, as Representative Windham stated very well, we should not take money away from other programs, but new money should go to increase support for programs like Access Missouri. And then more broadly, all of our programs need more support. College is just too expensive. I think Representative Shields made it very clear just how much tuition has increased from when she was in school to now sending her own children off to college. So, even a family of means struggle with today's tuition rates. So if a young person in Missouri can make our economy stronger by going to college and earning a degree, I truly think it's our responsibility and in our best interest to help.
Right. And I mean, those are all great points. And it sounds like a lot more focus needs to be put onto our need-based programs, but it sounds like the system as a whole, you would advocate for financial aid programs to be supported as well. For the same question to Senator Razer and Representative Black, do you both have anything to add to either one of those comments? Started with Senator Razer.
Just listening to it, I mean, and I go back to what Representative Shields said, that the cost of tuition is so high, and I think we need to get Missourians who maybe don't have kids that they're trying to put through college right now. I hear over and over people say, well, when I went to college, I took out a small loan and had a part-time job, and why can't these kids do it? Well, these kids are coming out with the equivalent of a mortgage on their back. And we need to understand that that is bad for the state. We need to understand that whether you live in Kansas City or St. Louis, you live in Trenton or St. Joe or Cape Girardeau, we're all in this together. And when the state continues to defund higher education, as we continue to see that line going the wrong way, college becomes more and more expensive. And when these students come out of college with a mortgage already strapped to their back, they can no longer buy a new car. That's going to hurt, the auto workers. It's going to hurt the car dealers. Now those folks don't have money to go out and eat dinner, and it's going to hurt our restaurant owners and our movie theaters. And there's a trickle down effect to this, that if we would invest in higher education and invest in our people, then that gets sent back out into our economy and helps us all. And it doesn't matter what part of the state you're from. I mean, that is just a fact. It's going to help everyone. And so, we've got to reverse this trend to try to bring down tuition while we're looking at how to make financial aid more accessible.
Representative Black. Representative Black, if you're talking, you might be on mute.
It was good. I was on mute. That gave me a little bit of time to think about what I was really going to say. I do think listening to the panel, and all of the people on the panel, I believe, are much higher educated, at least through the college system, than I am. I do think in this conversation, when we talk about the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development, trying to get Missourians employed is greater than only our 4-year four-year colleges in our state. And it seems to me like that's where the focus of our discussion has primarily been. When I look through here, I am the oldest one in the group discussing things, and probably who who Senator Razer is talking about, being old and thinking borrow a little bit of money and go to school, and you will get done and get it paid off. There's a lot of truth to what Senator Razer just said. For many people that attended school years and years ago, that will still be, we all live from our experiences. Very few of us completely get rid of those when we start making our decisions. So I guess to the end of this, and me getting to an answer and responding to your question, I look at higher education when I sit at the legislature and when I sitting in my living room at home of being more than just four-year colleges. And I was also of the generation that saw those signs in the hallway, work smarter, not harder, when four-year institutions come up with a darn good business model, instead of only about 18 to 20% of the kids in King City High School, where I graduated from, going on and attending higher education. Let's try to get 80% of them to attend higher education. And we built a business model that we added a lot of things to the university folks from 1979 when I started into it. Walking at the University of Missouri on brick streets weren't there when I went there. The institutions themselves, and it's nobody's fault that are there today, have grown the business to a point it takes a lot of money to be able to keep that business going. And some of that money doesn't have direct impact on student education. And I'll leave it at that. Don't forget the 2-year and other career technical education programs that Missourians can be successful at as well. So that's all. Thank you, Gerren.
Right. So, Representative Shields, I want to give you opportunity to answer that question as well, but I'll give you a question to kind of follow in the back of your mind and have the rest of the panelists think about it as well. But typically when we talk about equity in higher education in terms of students, we're thinking between the ages of 18 and 21. But adult learners are those who can experience the most need. So obviously programs like the Fast Track Incentive Grant can help support financial needs for tuition and fees, but there are some outstanding resources that many of our adults need looking to go back to school and be able to persist and finish. What areas in which the state, localities, or nonprofits should invest in what resources to help our adult students?
Thank you. I do want to add to the last question. Representative Windham talked about the lack of students that participate in the A+ program. And my first year, I listened to a bill that Representative Windham presented, and then I came to this conference, and I came back, and I presented a bill that I think will increase the numbers that will benefit from the A+ program. And I'm going to file it again this year. Last year, I didn't file it because I didn't know where we were going to be as a state financially. But I think it's important that our program on A+ remains, that you use your federal dollars first. I think it's always important to use other resources that are available. But what happens when those students do that is then they don't have access to their A+ dollars because they have timed out of access to the A+ dollars. And so I presented a bill, and I think through the pandemic, I think that this will be able to get more traction in the legislature, in which that will allow students who used all of their federal dollars to attend their community college, that they can use $10,000 of that A+ money to be spent at a four-year institution in our state. And I think that will increase the amount of students that are a minority that would be able to use those A+ dollars. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up that we're going to continue to do. It's not all of the reforms that we're looking at, but I think we have to be realistic in the legislature. We can't do lots of reforms all at one time. That just isn't the way the legislature works. It moves in baby steps. as we talk about those non-traditional learners, you're absolutely correct. They're adults that have already established their life, most of them. And but when we talk about them, I think that they also bring much more to the educational experience. I mean, they have a lot of life skills that they bring back to the classroom when they come. And so I think that they're also important to be there for our younger students that are also in those educational opportunities. But I think, as you said, they have lots of barriers. And one of them is care for their children. And as many of you know, if you follow the things that I am passionate about early learning and care for our children 0 to 5. And I think that there's a couple of things that we can do for our adult learners. Is if you think about the 40s and 50s in the United States, we didn't think our teachers need to have a college education. And now we would never bring a teacher into any of our classrooms, K through 12, without a college education. And right now we're treating our early learning specialists the same way, that they don't have to have a college education. And I think that we will move to that. I think that'll give opportunities for people to be able to get a 2 or 4 year degree, and those jobs will be in demand. But at the same time, there'll be opportunities for their children to be taken care of so they can pursue that education. Also, being CEO of the United Way, I think that there are resources that those students can access that will help them in their pursuit of education. And last, there's a lot of universities that are doing great things around this that they don't get measured on. Those that create food pantries on their campuses and other things. And I think that we need to realize that there's a lot more resources also on university campuses than there were when I was in college. And I think that we need to praise some of them for what they're doing. Thank you.
Right, that's great information. Thank you for sharing that. Representative Windham, wanted to pass along that same question to you.
Yeah, so briefly, I'll lament about term limits right quick. So one of the downfalls of term limits is that we don't have much institutional knowledge, and that's a big talking point in the legislature. So in 2007, the Missouri Senate went on a tour around the state talking about the rising cost of tuition and how we got to make tuition lower. I believe that Senator Charlie Shields at the time was on the committee, and one of the recommendations by the then president of the Council on Public Higher Education was that we need to reform the scholarship program. We just need to make one program because things were too confusing. Well, things are still too confusing. The price of college is only going up, and from what I see, it hasn't been a priority of the legislature broadly that we talk about higher education, which in my opinion is a problem. In my bio, we didn't talk about how I have $60,000 in student loans. So it's something, especially when we talk about college affordability, that's especially personal to me. So I do think that we need to make the wheel for big structural change when we talk about higher education and our scholarship programs. So when we talk about adult learners, I think that Representative Shields and Representative Black probably got me beat on their answers there. However, I say a big roadblock is just going back to money, right? So some institutions, and big shout out to the couple breakout sessions that I was in prior to with Saab, and then also with St. Louis graduates. St. Louis graduates talk a little bit about some of the financial burdens, but I think that it's important to look at what our institutions are doing with their COVID dollars. So it was a couple institutions in our state, Lincoln and Harris Stowe, that are really proud that they paid off the account balances of the students that had overdue balances at their institutions. And I think that's great, and that leads to students coming back and students being able to get their transcripts and apply for jobs or apply to graduate school. So I think it's important to note that some institutions are doing things like that and some institutions are not. And I think that those are things that impact adult learners. So we could talk about the fast track program, but again, it's a lot of things wrong with the fast track program. Whether we talk about it being a last dollar program like A plus, but I will note that it has $500 for folks that do end up not getting any award because they had last dollar, which A plus doesn't. So that's another inequity and source of disjointedness there. But I'll just go ahead and end it there because I see that we kind of running down on time, and I want to make sure we get to a couple more topics. But that's a little bit of my thoughts on adult learning.
All right, great. And yes, we're going to switch gears a little bit because there's a topic I wanted to cover that kind of gets lost in the conversation. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has spotlighted many areas of concern throughout the country that some may have overlooked before. And for example, the mental health of students and faculty on campus, whether that's anxiety, stress, depression, or burnout, was kind of a pre-existing concern for our institutions before the pandemic. And obviously, we must address these issues, the mental health crisis, before we can even have a healthy learning environment. For Senator Razer, for you first, what mental health problems have you seen in your community? Are there any other areas of concern within education that you have seen or want to raise?
Other areas as far as mental health is concerned, or just in general?
Mental health is concerned.
Yeah. Look, I think this isn't just a higher education issue. This is a societal issue. We're seeing that burnout in students and faculty on our campuses, at our colleges and universities. We're seeing it in our hospitals with our doctors and our nurses who are overwhelmed. We're seeing it, with teenagers who are dealing with life coming home and not being able to escape school because they're scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and the problems that social media causes. I am grateful because I think we're nearing, if not at a point, where a lot of the stigma behind mental health issues that existed even 10, 20 years ago are starting to go away. And I think it's similar to the issue of addiction and the fact that people are starting to admit when they have a problem and reach out for help, and families realize that this isn't a problem of that group or this group, that it's something that affects every single family. And we need to listen to experts and put our heads together and figure out how do we help, our students and our faculty, the men and women in our hospitals, everyone with mental health. If you need help, ask for help, find it. That's something that we need to be saying over and over and over to people. I think, those of us in the legislature probably need it by the end. These jobs get stressful sometimes and they get tense, and we're passionate. It's something that we all deal with. And so we have to start listening and figuring out ways that we can better help our institutions when it comes to mental health issues.
Senator Williams, over to you, sir. Same question. Senator Williams, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think Senator Razer really hit it spot on, making sure that those resources are available. I do want to point out something else that's really important when it comes to mental health disparity. This is a space that I'm very passionate about, but really stressing the importance of access to mental health services. First, behavioral health services for young people, ensuring that they're getting those services as young as age as possible when it comes to experiencing anything around it. And then most importantly, the stigma around just mental health when it comes to males, in particular Black males, being able to really stress, as Greg said, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. And I think what I've seen, and Representative Windham and I represent a part of the region where some of the most challenging school districts in the state. And we've seen, various instances. For example, I remember being over at the Jennings High School. And as I'm touring the high school to just meet with different students and visit classrooms, I saw just students crying. And I remember asking the principal, why are so many students that we see in the hallways crying? And it was because one of their classmates was killed in a serious car accident. So, I don't think the state provides enough resources for schools in general, but in particular, those school districts to have services available to students who are grieving and going through things that may impact them mentally. So again, I don't really know a better way to say it. Until we really start investing in these spaces, really have a serious conversation to remove the stigma, but also address the disparities and recognize that there are a population of people in this state that would never even view healthcare as an option because of the system and the way that we have things set up in this state. So until we start investing in those areas, having a serious conversation about it, and really taking an approach from a not only a comprehensive standpoint, but a financially sound commitment in those areas, we'll continue to struggle there.
Thanks so much for both of you sharing that. I do want to give an opportunity for Representative Black and Shields and Windham in that order, if you had anything else to add.
Looking at the time, if I add something, I better add it fast. I do want to believe that both senators are, everything they said, there's no argument about that. But I guess I want to believe that we've started reaching either the top or bottom, whatever way you look at it, of these kind of mental health crisis being a taboo subject. I think we have reached the point where it's going to get much, much better. We're heading that direction. And the fact that people are starting to communicate more face to face and find those friends and trust them. I guess I'm stating that over my 33 years of teaching in school, I watched whenever a kid got a cell phone and started texting to each other, and that grew and continued to go up with other types of the social media. And I do believe talking, now this is at the high school level, but talking about my friends in high school level, I think maybe we've hit the top or the bottom, whichever way you want to look at it. We're going to start going the other way. If nothing else, God help us if we need to be there.
Right.
And so to save time, I'll just move on, Gerren. I think that, well, we know that before the pandemic that most mental illness really developed, especially in young men in between the ages of 18 and 24. So since the pandemic, we know that there is going to be more issues. I think that the thing that we also must be aware about is before the pandemic, we didn't have enough mental health professionals to help the 1 in 5 diagnosed Americans that have mental illness now. So I think that we're just going to see more of a crisis. Also, I'll just say that we know that the K through 12 education is receiving about $2 billion to deal with a lot of things. And hopefully they will spend some of those dollars on some mental health for our students through the pandemic.
And so with Representative Windham, we'll start with you. I wanted to have a moment for a quick round the horn to allow all of you to talk about maybe one of your upcoming session top priorities or any concluding thoughts before we wrap up today. So we'll start with Representative Windham.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Gerren, and thanks everybody for joining us. So quickly, I'll close out with something that I saw in the chat talking about undocumented students and how we're losing students going from high school in Missouri to college out of state. And in the Education Appropriation Subcommittee, we recently got a printout about the states, the 5 top states that we export to students to. And 4 out of those 5 states had least restrictive laws regarding undocumented students going to higher education than ours. We're one of the bottom 8 most cruel states in the nation when we talk about undocumented students going to higher education. So that's definitely something to think about, and it's something that Kansas is beating us badly in. So I'll end with that. Let's not lose to Kansas, and let's pay what we owe Missouri.
Senator Williams, over to you next, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Gerren. And again, thank you for moderating this esteemed panel. I'm really grateful for the work that you do, really grateful for the work that the department is doing around these issues. I'll say I'm most passionate about improving support, again, for the programs and institutions that serve the students and families that we all represent. You know, specifically, this means we need, again, more investments in Access Missouri. I'd like to see more support for UMSL and Harris Stowe State University, Lincoln University. And by making investments in scholarships and core support, I truly believe that we can make real improvements in the students and institutions that are vital to the economic mobility in my district and beyond.
Representative Black.
First, as we talk about different scholarship availabilities, last year I wasn't very popular because I wasn't supportive of increasing the A+ funding for that dual credit. I don't know, I know Representative Windham knew that I was doing that. I wanted to first get everything back to the true funding level before we expand these programs. And I'm going to probably stay pretty intense in that. Let's fund what we have adequately before we start creating or even recreating, Representative Windham, other things. Let's get to where we have those funded if it at all is possible. And I think you've probably, all the listeners have figured out listening to me, I don't believe in forgetting that there's more than 4-year colleges with master degrees, PhDs, et cetera, in higher education in our state. And I want to continue to try to keep those programs in the mix as well when we do discussions. Thank you very much for letting me be part of this, Gerren, and for everybody else putting up with the old man today. Thank you.
Senator Razer.
Well, Gerren, thank you for having us. And Rusty, thank you for Representative Black. Thank you for bringing up our community colleges. I proudly represent both UMKC and Metropolitan Community Colleges. I believe you have North Central in your district. If not, it's right up the road, and I know it's an institution you care about. I want to just end by talking to the folks that are watching this. Gerren has put together 5 members of the legislature. It's bipartisan, it's bicameral. We represent diverse parts of our state. I believe all 5 of us care about every citizen in the state. We care about higher education and understand its importance. None of us completely agree on everything, but we are all willing to sit down and have thoughtful conversations about how to move our state forward. And I'm not going to be political, but we're coming up on an election year, and we need our population to understand that not everyone that we serve with has the same feeling about higher education or education in general. I would love to have these sorts of conversations on the Senate floor and the House floor and really debate the issues. And too often we get torn down into, just silliness in Jefferson City. We need more people like my colleagues who are on this call with us today. Thank you for putting this together, Gerren.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, Representative Shields.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. So much to wrap up. I think that one of the things I think it's important we do is that we fund our universities. They're closest to the students and they know what they need for their students to be successful. I'm really proud of the work that the university that I represent, Missouri Western, does a great job at working on student services. And I want to make sure that we support them so that their students can be successful. And I just want to make sure that that we think about how we fund education in the state through funding institutions, but that also that we fund through these scholarships. And I will continue to work hard on that A+ bill so we can make sure that our students that have to use their federal dollars first have that opportunity to cash in on their A+ dollars that they work so hard for. With that, thank you very much.
Well, again, to our panelists, I thank you so very much for spending time with us and sharing your thoughts and insight. Again, great variety of perspective here. Again, I will now turn it over to Sarah to conclude this afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been an amazing opportunity to hear from Missouri's legislators. And so we thank you so much for being part of our summit today and for supporting our work in this space. So thank you so much. So thank you to our audience as well for joining us for day 1 of the summit. Be sure to join us for tomorrow for day 2. Check out our conference landing website. I put it into the chat for our full lineup. And you can also continue the conversations on our new website as well. So with that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you at 8:30 tomorrow morning.